Good afternoon, or morning, or evening. Wherever you are very welcome to this free webinar on corporate fundraising. My name is Simon. I'm hoping you can all hear me. Please give me a message or give me some sort of indication that you can hear me and everything is working fine. While we are just waiting for a few more people to join us, please feel free and go ahead and share this while we get set up and while people log in and join it. Please share it on your social media and send it across to anyone who works in fundraising or the nonprofit or charity sector who you think could do with increasing their corporate fundraising. And come get them all to join us for this free webinar on corporate fundraising. We're going to be here for maybe about 30 minutes, 20 or 30 minutes, maybe more if there's a lot of questions. Please feel free to post your own questions about whatever it is you're going through, whatever your own personal or professional problems are as a corporate fundraiser or someone who's trying to raise more money from corporates. And we will try and get to all of these questions as we do. If anyone wants to post in the chat box there and just let me know you're here with me, then please go ahead. And as I say, if you want to send me any questions, then please do. Also, just before we kick off, while I have you here, what I might just get you to do, if you're watching me on YouTube, which you should be, then please hit the subscribe button. We're going to be doing a lot more free webinars, interviews with world famous fundraisers and experts, and just a lot more free events for you guys to help increase your fundraising, because I'm very conscious, very aware that training for small nonprofits is very expensive. And so what we want to do here is actually provide more and more resources for you guys that is either really, really affordable or, do you know what, even completely free like this. Does that sound fair? Is that something you guys want? Is actually cheap and free fundraising help and support. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get this going up so that you can see my slides. And then what we're going to do is actually start this and go through some of our corporate fundraising stuff and go through kind of the basics and just the tips of really what I want to cover today is, I suppose, how to identify potential funders for the work that you do, how to find corporate partners, and try and start to talk a little bit about what it is they're actually looking for, why it is they give money to our organizations, and how we can start to engage with them. And as I say, we're going to open this up for any questions. If anyone wants to throw out any questions in particular for their own organization, then I'm happy to try and answer them as best as I can. So essentially what we want to talk about today is this timeline of what people call maybe the corporate fundraising funnel or the corporate sponsorship funnel. It's very similar to like a sales funnel that you would see for any organization, any sales organization or marketing organization that are trying to get people in. And essentially, this is the flow of corporate leads that we're going to put people through. So we're going to be, what we want to be is really systematic and really considered about how we start to approach companies and how we start to ask for money. All of you, I imagine, do not have very much free time, do not have lots of resources at your fingertips. And so what we want to do is be really clever with our time and use it effectively. And usually when I work with clients where they've been unsuccessful with corporate fundraising, it's usually where they've taken this very broad kind of hit and miss approach. We'll write to 100 different companies, 1,000 different companies who we think have lots of money and try and get them to donate to us, try and just ask them for money out of the blue as like a cold approach. And really good corporate fundraising, you should never have to make a cold approach. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build our network. We're trying to look at our existing network, and we're trying to talk to people who maybe have an interest in the work we do or that we have some sort of relationship with, and try and convert them into funders, trying to convert them into donors. So you'll see on this slide the stages that we go through. And very often the mistake we make is jumping to that solicitation stage. So, the first interaction we have with the company is phoning them up cold or sending them an email or sending them a letter. and just asking them for something. And what we have to kind of be realistic about here is, why would anyone support us? Why would anyone give us something out of the blue when there's so many worthwhile causes that we could support, and when there's so many causes that are more in line with what we're trying to achieve? And the real secret of corporate fundraising, corporate approaches, is not to think about what you need, or although that's always in the back of your mind, but actually to try and think about what these companies need, what they're trying to achieve, what their goals are, and how we can fulfill them. Our goal is to, our role in this is to fulfill their objectives. So this, let me see if I can get a pointer coming up here. Yes, I can. Isn't that amazing? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to feed a bunch of companies into this identification stage. So this first stage of the funnel is a bit wider spread. We're trying to identify companies who could potentially be good funders for us. So we're trying to find essentially any company in the world, any company in your country is a potential funder, aren't they? And what we're trying to do is identify the leads that are most in line. We're going to go through essentially the order that we contact them. We want to contact first the companies who are most likely to say yes to us, most likely to support us. But in theory, we could identify every company in the world, and we would have millions and millions of companies that we could throw into this identification stage. What we're then going to do is we're going to whittle down those companies through this qualification stage. And in the qualification stage, what we're trying to do is find, get rid of the companies who definitely aren't going to support us. So if they're a company who are very clear that they're not going to support animal charities, and you're an animal charity, then we're not going to waste our time trying to engage with them. Even we might at this stage get rid of the ones who we think are not going to be very generous. So people like, we might think of someone like Apple or someone like Google as a very rich company, like obscenely and offensively rich. But we still might not waste our time approaching them, because they're a company that doesn't really give away very much money at all, and probably is not going to give away money to the work that we do. So at this stage, we're going to qualify them. We might also qualify them in the fact that your organization might have restrictions. So you might not accept donations or partnerships with like alcohol companies or tobacco companies. And if that's the case, then obviously we're not going to waste time in moving them through our funnel. So this qualification stage is really getting rid of the dead wood that we just don't want to waste our time with. Then this stage is really where a lot of our time is going to be spent. A big chunk of our time, the majority of our time, is going to be spent cultivating these companies. So if you think of this as almost like dating, we're trying to get to know them, trying to understand their likes, trying to understand their hopes and dreams as a company, what their goals are, what their objectives are, where we can maybe slot in that. And we're also trying to impress them. We're trying to woo them here. So no one likes to be just just have a call out of the blue asking for something. We want to instead be trying to offer something here and trying to gain their trust and start a good relationship with them. So we're going to put in a lot of time in this cultivation stage with our companies. And only then do we move on to the solicitation stage. When we built a level of trust, when the person is ready to be asked or the company is ready to be asked, then we're going to put across our proposal to them. And we don't want to jump to this too soon, because we want to make sure they're in the right place. And if you put in enough time and energy and a good relationship in these early stages, in this cultivation stage, then the ask, very often it takes care of itself. You almost find like the company asking you, okay, what is it we can do for you? And so this solicitation stage, we want to make sure we get to. These companies are going to need to be asked, and we're going to need to spell out exactly what we need them to do. But we don't want to spend too much, but we don't want to jump to this too quickly. So after we've asked them and they've said yes, we get to this final stage, which is stewardship, which is essentially looking after these people who've said yes to us, these companies who are supporting us, and essentially keeping them happy, so that the same time next year we can go back with another ask, a bigger ask, or the next time we have a project that we need to get funded, or something that we need to get sponsored or donated to, that we've treated them so well that we're going back to them. I mean, the key here in this stewardship stage is you don't want the only contact with your donors or your corporate partners. You don't want the only contact to be asks. You want there to be a good level of thanking them, a good level of rewarding them, a good level of recognition, a good level of giving them whatever it is we've determined they're trying to achieve, and keeping them sweet, keeping them on our side, so that we're not only just asking for stuff. So this is the general timeline that we go through with this corporate fundraising funnel. So we might dump in here, 1,000 different companies in this identification stage, and we whittle it down, and we realize that actually there's only maybe 100 companies who are worth spending our time cultivating. The others drop off before that. And then we might only get to actually asking into a position where we ask maybe 50 of these companies or 40 of these companies for money. And actually maybe only 10 of those say yes. So you can see why these boxes are getting smaller, because we're essentially whittling down and we're getting them to that stage. The other thing to note on this is, in terms of timeline, what people usually say about this is on average it takes about 18 months. So it takes 18 months to identify, from identifying a company initially, or starting to identify companies, to actually receiving money. And that's the bad news, is that the thing about corporate fundraising is it takes a long time, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of work and putting in your resources before we see any payoff. The payoffs can be very lucrative, and they could be very big donations. Obviously, a lot of companies have a lot of money, and if we keep up a good relationship, that can continue to pay off year after year after year. But it's going to take us initially 18 months on average, and so we need to be realistic about that. That's the bad news. But the good news is that actually you already have companies in each of these stages. So we're going to go through this, but you already have companies who, whether you have been aware of it or not, you're already cultivating them. You're already wooing them and treating them well, and you're getting ready to ask them. I imagine there's companies as well that you've already asked and they've said no. But that means they're still in this cultivation stage, and that we're not actually starting from scratch here. So the good news is actually there's companies on your radar who we can go in pretty quickly, and we're not going to have to wait that 18 months for money, but actually we can move a lot faster than that. But the key thing here is that we're constantly pushing people through this cycle. We're constantly feeding new companies into this identification stage, even when we've got companies at the solicitation stage. So even while you're converting some to donors, you're continuing to get out there and identify new companies, going to networking events, and feeding more potential partners into this funnel. And it's a constant process to be doing it. And it can be daunting, and it can seem difficult, and especially when it's so time consuming, it can be easy to give up. And that's usually where I see clients or potential clients fail the most, is because they don't see this return in the first month or the first 2 months. They ask a company and the money doesn't come in, or they say no, that actually they give up on that and they don't put the time into it. But remember that a no from a company is actually a not yet. And so what we're trying to do is continue to work on that, continue to invest our time and resources into looking after them and developing that relationship, so that we can get to the stage where we ask them for money. So what I want you to do, if you're new to corporate fundraising, or if you feel that your corporate fundraising is a bit all over the place, is actually try and be a bit more systematic about it. Try and mentally or on paper, on a spreadsheet, identify all the companies in your radar and think about what stage they're at. And then start thinking about with each of them, okay, how can I move them to the next stage? What is my plan to move them to the next stage? What is my plan to look after them and get them on board so that they understand what we do, they trust me, they like me, and then what is my plan for asking them for money, and what is the project that's going to suit them, and what is the plan for looking after them in that stewardship stage? So this is the timeline we're going to go through. If anyone has any questions on this at this point, we're going to delve a little bit deeper, but please go ahead and chuck it in the chat box. If you're struggling with any aspect of this, or any of these bits don't make sense, then please throw it in the chat box, and I'll try to address it. So what I want to talk about, the key thing here is identifying companies. So this is something that people often struggle with. If you talk to your board maybe, or if you're kind of initially brainstorming, what we tend to do is we tend to jump on the organizations who we think of as having money, so wealthy organizations, wealthy companies. But very often these are the companies that are getting asked the most. These are companies who don't necessarily care about the work you do. And one of my favorite fundraisers, Rory Green, she has this quote where she says it's much easier to make someone who cares about you give you money than it is to make someone who has money care about you. And what she means by that is, it takes a long time to build trust with someone. Whereas if we can identify the people who already trust us, already have affection for the work we do, then it's going to be much easier to sit down with them and talk about how they can actually help us and how their company can get on board. So one of the exercises I go through with my clients is going through this ever-increasing circles exercise where we look at their network and we look at who is worthwhile approaching. And usually when I start working with them, they kind of think of themselves as having no corporate partners or no potential corporate partners that they can approach. And usually by the time we finish this exercise, we have a few hundred good, solid leads that we can start looking at approaching. So what I want you to do is actually go through this exercise with your own organization, with your own team, and with your own network, and look at this. So what we do is we start off by looking at you. We look at your own personal network. And what I would do is, if I was working with you, is I would generally start by looking at your LinkedIn, look at who you're connected with. We would talk about who you used to go to college with, who you used to work with in different companies, who your brother-in-law works for, who your sister-in-law works for, who your kids work for, who your parents work for. We would look at these people who have a personal relationship with you and know you well, and automatically we can jump to that level where we can use them or ask them to help us get an introduction to that CEO or that marketing manager or that HR manager. Now, a key thing to point out here, very often people kind of object to this or shy away from this because they feel like they're imposing on their own network. But the key to corporate fundraising, remember, is what we're trying to do is we're trying to fulfill the company's objectives. So we're not just going to be contacting these companies and asking for money, asking for favors. Actually, we're going to be contacting them and talking about how we can help them, how we can help them with their marketing, how we can help them with their staff engagement, how we can help them connect with new customers or make their local area better. So we're going to be helping them. So we're not going to be imposing, and therefore it shouldn't be such a struggle for someone who's already in your network to make that introduction, because they're making an introduction that's going to help this person. So we start by looking at your network and all those personal connections you already have or you already have built up over your lifetime. And what you're going to do as well is you're going to continue to build your personal network, because you're going to be going to networking events, you're going to be meeting people in your day-to-day life, and always you're going to be thinking about, okay, what company do they work in? Who can they get me in front of? Who can they introduce me to? How can I help these people? And so we're always looking at expanding our network throughout that. But in the short term, immediately, what we want to do is we also want to go further afield and do the same exercise with all of your staff and all of your board members. So if it's appropriate, you might sit down with them one-on-one and actually talk to them about who's in their network, who they're willing to introduce you to, who they can connect you with, or you might do a little bit of snooping. You might do some snooping on their LinkedIn. You might just kind of keep your ears open when you're talking to them in the staff room or at meetings or when you take them out for coffee, and figure out who they can introduce you to. And it's basically the same exercise we've done with ourselves. Your staff, your board members, these are people that have a lot of connections, who work in companies. They have a level of trust already. And if they're willing to make the introductions, then these are some of the best introductions we can get as fundraisers to then start talking about a partnership with the corporate. So we're going to go a bit further afield. We're going to look at our suppliers. So we're going to look at the suppliers of your organization. So who supplies your toilet paper? Who supplies your medical supplies that you use in your project work? Who is your landlord? Who is your nonprofit solicitor? All of these things. A good exercise to do is ask whoever is in charge of your accounts, ask them to print off accounts payable for the last 3 to 5 years. Look at everyone your organization has paid in the last 3 to 5 years and think about trying to develop that relationship. So these are companies who have made money from you. These are companies that know your organization and trust you. These are companies that are trying to keep you happy. And so very quickly, we can definitely get a meeting with them about how we can potentially help them with their marketing, help them with their HR, staff engagement, in return for a partnership where they're also going to help us. So your suppliers are a really good place to start talking to. We're also going to look at your service users and fans of your organization. So service users, it might not be appropriate depending on the nature of your organization. It might not be appropriate to actually talk to your service users and follow that lead. But it might be, these might be people who used your service and no longer need it, and they're in a position where they can actually help you, even though you've helped them. Say you're like an animal rehoming center. If you're rehoming a dog into a home, then absolutely your service users are the family that you've just brightened up their life, and you can absolutely have that conversation about how their employer could get involved. You might look at your fans. So who's following you on Twitter? Who's following you on Facebook? Who's on your mailing list? And every single one of those people is a fan of your organization, and we can start that conversation with them. And in my corporate fundraising course, the full course that I'm going to share with you at the end of this, you can actually, there's a lot more detail about how we can identify those fans and how we can start to learn where they work, and we can develop them into essentially ambassadors or introducers into these companies that we're trying to get into. Okay, let's go further afield. Let's start looking at relevant areas of work. So what companies would be interested in the area of your work you do? And you're probably already doing this because this is a bit of a no-brainer. But if you're a children's charity, you're going to be looking at companies who supply children's products or whose target market is around children. If you work with animals, then obviously you're going to be looking at companies that deal with animals. If you work within the legal system, then solicitors and barristers might be good to talk to. You're trying to find people who line up with your world, whose target market, whose target customers are already within your world, because essentially they want more exposure, they want more customers. And so if we can find that overlap, then these are going to be really strong companies for us to talk to. We're also going to look at other charities. So charities who are in a similar space as you. You might view them as competitors or similar charities. You might look at similar charities who are in different areas or different countries. What we want to do is we want to look at who their corporate partners are. So they can be really good if they have a Charity of the Year program and they're working with this charity. They're going to move on next year, and they've already proven that they're interested in this kind of work and that they have money to give, and so they can be a great one to talk to. Or it could be that you actually go to the company's competitor and you say, look, here's a case study of what your competitor is doing. We want to do something similar. We want to get you on board. And so it can be a good kind of example to show them when you're trying to do them. So look at other charities in your space who are similar and learn from them in terms of what partnerships have already been successful for them. Right, moving further afield, what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at local charities. So local to your organization. So who is in the same building as you? Who shares an office space with you? Who is on the same road as you? Who is in the same town as you? So the more local we get it, people and companies especially want to share local because this is where their customers are. So if we can actually approach these companies who are local to us, then it gives us a shoe-in. It's not the best connection. It's not the most intimate connection we have with these, and there isn't an automatic level of trust. But certainly it's going to be much better than picking up the phone and cold calling that company whose office is based in London, in Dublin, in New York, when you're based somewhere completely different. So we want to try and keep it local. And then the final thing that we might consider is actually these cold calling that we talked about. But really, as in my time as corporate fundraising, I have never had to do cold calling. I've done it as a choice, but really, if we're looking at our network before we get into that cold space, there should be enough companies and people within that network that it's going to take you so much time to work through them and continually work through them that you'll never have the need to do any cold calling or cold approaches. Remember, you're still increasing your own network by going to networking events and building your network with people you meet, that actually this whole network continues to expand. Likewise, your charity is going to keep getting new suppliers. It's going to keep getting new fans and new service users. And so all of these things continue to expand and continue to be used. And so if you have a fear of corporate fundraising, usually that fear is coming from the idea that you're going to have to be doing cold approach and cold calling. What I always say is really a good fundraiser will never have to do a cold approach because this network is so, there's so much depth in it, and we're going to continue to build it. Right. Any questions on the network? If anyone wants to talk specifically about their own network and any queries they might have, then please do throw a question in that question box. And I will do my best to answer it. Now, I just have maybe a couple more slides that I want to talk to. Today, I'm not going to get too much into your proposal and how we kind of cultivate them and how we look after them and how we build that relationship. We can do that another day. But initially, let's think about what you're going to be offering, because this is crucial to this idea of your goal is to fulfill the company's objectives. Remember, we're not going to be approaching them asking for something. Our initial thing is to approach them and talk to them about what we can do for them. So think about what you as a nonprofit, you as a charity can offer companies. And we have a lot to offer. And most of the time we undersell ourselves because we feel like we're so desperate for money and we're so privileged to get this money from companies. But actually, very often we have more to offer the companies than we realize, and they need us for what they're trying to achieve. So obviously, we give them that feel-good factor that they're making the world a better place. But that can be quite minor in this. It's major when we're talking to human beings. But as a company, remember, a company's goal and ambition is to make profit. And that usually doesn't work very well with that feel-good factor of making the world a better place. It's expensive to make the world a better place. But what you can offer is education and training. You are the expert in your area. You are the expert in the work you do. And so think about, can you provide information? Can you provide training to their staff? I have their staff welfare as well. So can you provide support to staff who are going through whatever it is that you're trying to address? So what resources can you provide them? I mean, this is a great one for going into colleges, going into places where they have new recruits, going into companies where they're trying to upskill and educate their staff all the time. You have the expertise to get in there, and by offering that as a free or paid service, it's a way to crack into companies who might not respond to a cold ask or an ask for money for no reason, but they're going to start that relationship if you're giving them something initially. Think about your VIP benefits. So do you have someone on the board or someone within your organization who's especially interesting, who's especially good at speaking at events, who's a bit of a draw? You might have a celebrity or minor celebrity involved with your organization that you can give them access to. If you have cute puppies or cute animals in your organization, can you offer them, bring them into work to brighten up their day? Do you have tickets to events or access to events that these companies might not necessarily be able to get access to? So think about ways you can offer them these kind of VIP benefits that other organizations can't necessarily do. Think about your goods and services that you can offer. So a great one for a lot of for some organizations is like first aid training or health training. My son's school got a free defibrillator from a charity when the school first opened, and so that school continues to fundraise for this charity because they feel indebted to them for that defibrillator. It was viewed as a very lovely gesture to give this free defibrillator, and for that we're indebted to them, and we're constantly running really annoying fundraising events and being asked to donate to them. But all the parents are happy to, because we feel like they've enriched our lives. Think about companies, how they want to be part of the winning team. So they don't want to be necessarily bailing you out of trouble. They don't want to hear that you're a failing organization who's struggling to do it, but they want to be part of achieving something pretty amazing. And so if you've got a winning concept or an idea that needs funding to push it over the line, then yes, companies want to be part of that winning team because it's something to brag about. Can you give them access to supporters? So when we're looking at like target markets, if their customer target market is supporters that you have access to, can they pay you to provide advertising, to provide mentions of them on their social media? They want to increase their customer base. So is that something that you can help them doing through your own supporters? If you're running events, you might be looking at speeches, branding, anything that's going to get their name out there, going to give them an audience. Remember, they want to sell more. So can you offer them? Can you help them that? Can you help them with press releases? Can you be pushing out press releases with the partnership? They're always trying to get more coverage, more exposure. Can you help them do that through press releases and media coverage? A great question to ask these companies is, what else would you like to see? So we're going to be sitting down with these companies. We're going to be taking people out for coffee and trying to learn their objectives, simply asking them, what else would you like to see? A big problem or a big mistake we often make in corporate fundraising is trying to second guess what the corporate wants, trying to presume what they want, assuming what they want, and putting a proposal together before we've even spoken to them. But actually those initial stages, those early stages, are a conversation, and it's totally appropriate to ask them, what would they like to see in a partnership? What are they trying to achieve that's missing, and how can we help? And that's going to form the shape of your proposal. And then finally, think about this idea of delighters and how we can delight these corporates. What we can give them that's a little bit extra. Is it invitations to events? Is it free wine? Is it like a nice, lovely note? Is it sending them a book that you think they're going to be interested in? Is it massaging their ego and complimenting them on the work they do? How can we delight them so that we stand out from the other organizations? So, really always be putting yourself in the shoes of the company. They don't just want to give away money. They're not even really allowed to just give away money because their intention is to make a profit. But what is it that we can bring to the table before we ask for money, or before we encourage them to get involved in a project that we want to do? So, this great quote that we talk about is asking for advice and getting a gift. Ask for a gift and you'll get advice. And that's it. If we go straight into it looking for money, then they're going to tell us all the things we're doing wrong and how we should be running our operation, and all the problems with the charity sector. Whereas if we're asking for advice, people then want to get involved. We're massaging their ego a little bit, showing them that we want them to get involved because they're such experts, and then the money follows. And some of the lines I like to use when I'm reaching out to a person initially is that I'd love to get their advice or get their input on a project that the organization is working on because they're an expert. I'd love to get your advice on marketing because your company is so good at marketing. I'd love to get your advice on reaching out to the local community. I ask people, can I buy you a coffee? And for some reason, people say yes all the time, but it gives you an idea to have a real informal chat with them and understand them. I thought you'd be interested in this article. I thought you'd be interested in this resource. Can I invite you and your team to a small event that we're having? Or just simply thank you. Thank you for writing that article. Thank you for the service you provide. Thank you for that thing I saw you posted on LinkedIn. Thank you for the work you guys do. Whatever, people love to be thanked. And so you can see with all of these, we're not leading with like an imposition and asking for something one way. What we're trying to do is build a relationship, because people give when there's a relationship there. People give to people. And so we want to get in front of them so they can see our eyes, they can see we're a human who's trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve, and we can start to work together. So that's really kind of almost like the first half of the corporate fundraising cycle. And I really want to keep these free webinars short so that you can just dip in and out of them. I hope that's been helpful. If anyone has any questions on it, then please feel free to type in now. But what I have online, you'll see there at changefundraising.com/training. I have a number of courses. One of them is a corporate fundraising course, which goes into a lot more details, has templates for proposals, has lots of resources for you to use. And if you use that coupon code, that voucher code YouTube first, then what you'll get is a massive discount on it. It's a really, really cheap course. If you're in Euro countries, it's only €20. It's much cheaper than all these conferences and these courses that you see. And it's really, really in-depth. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to put them in the chat or follow up by contacting me. There's my email address, simon@changefundraising.com. Go to my website, changefundraising.com. And again, if you haven't already done it, then please click like, subscribe, whatever it is at the bottom of your YouTube, because we're going to be doing a lot more of these kind of webinars here and trying to provide really useful information to you for free. And so please do click that subscribe button and get your notifications turned on so that you don't miss any of those videos. But until the next one, please reach out and ask and contact me if you have any questions or you want to talk more about corporate fundraising or any form of fundraising, and I would be delighted to help. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining me on this free webinar about corporate fundraising. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Look forward to hearing from you, and take care.